Hello and welcome to Being Prodigy. Now put on your headphones and start learning. To get special study material, just contact us through the link in the description.
The very first section of the Underground in the world opened on 10 January 1863 between Paddington and Farrington Street in London. On that day 10,000 passengers were carried, with trains running every 10 minutes. By 1880 the expanded train service was carrying 40 million passengers a year. To make approximately 2 miles of railway, 900 houses had to be destroyed. Thus the London Tube Railway led to a massive displacement of the London poor, especially between the two world wars. Yet the Underground eventually became a huge success. By the 20th century, most large metropolises such as New York, Tokyo and Chicago could not do without their well-functioning transit systems. As a result, the population in the city became more dispersed. Better planned suburbs and a good railway network enabled large numbers to live outside central London and travel to work. These new conveniences wore down social distinctions and also created new ones. How did these changes affect domestic and public life? Did they have the same significance for all social groups? Social change in the city in the 18th century, the family had been a unit of production and consumption as well as of political decision-making. The function and the shape of the family were completely transformed by life in the industrial city. Ties between members of households loosened, and among the working class the institution of marriage tended to break down. Women of the upper and middle classes in Britain, on the other hand, faced increasingly higher levels of isolation, although their lives were made easier by domestic maids who cooked, cleaned and cared for young children on low wages. Women who worked for wages had some control over their lives, particularly among the lower social classes. However, many social reformers felt that the family as an institution had broken down and needed to be saved or reconstructed by pushing these women back into the home. Men, women and family in the city no doubt encouraged a new spirit of individualism among both men and women, and a freedom from the collective values that were a feature of the smaller rural communities. But men and women did not have equal access to this new urban space. As women lost their industrial jobs and conservative people railed against their presence in public spaces, women were forced to withdraw into their homes. The public space became increasingly a male preserve, and the domestic sphere was seen as the proper place for women. Most political movements of the 19th century, such as Chartism, a movement demanding the vote for all adult males, and the 10-hour movement, limiting hours of work in factories, mobilized large numbers of men. Only gradually did women come to participate in political movements for suffrage that demanded the right to vote for women, or for married women's rights to property, from the 1870s. By the 20th century, the urban family had been transformed yet again, partly by the experience of the valuable wartime work done by women, who were employed in large numbers to meet war demands. The family now consisted of much smaller units. Above all, the family became the heart of a new market, of goods and services, and of ideas. If the new industrial city provided opportunities for mass work, it also raised the problem of mass leisure on Sundays and other common holidays.
This is Being Prodigy. To get special study material, just contact us through the link in the description. And please subscribe to show your support.
How did people organize their newfound leisure time? Leisure and consumption for wealthy Britishers. There had long been an annual London season. Several cultural events, such as the opera, the theatre and classical music performances were organized for an elite group of 300-400 families in the late 18th century. Meanwhile, working classes met in pubs to have a drink, exchange news and sometimes also to organize for political action. Many new types of large-scale entertainment for the common people came into being, some made possible with money from the state. Libraries, art galleries and museums were established in the 19th century to provide people with a sense of history and pride in the achievements of the British. At first, visitors to the British Museum in London numbered just about 15,000 every year, but when entry was made free in 1810, visitors swamped the museum. Their number jumped to 127,643 in 1824 to 1825, shooting up to 825, 901 by 1846. Music halls were popular among the lower classes, and, by the early 20th century, Cinema became the great mass entertainment for mixed audiences. British industrial workers were increasingly encouraged to spend their holidays by the sea, so as to derive the benefits of the sun and bracing winds. Over 1 million British people went to the seaside at Blackpool in 1883. By 1939 their numbers had gone up to 7 million. Politics in the city in the severe winter of 1886, when outdoor work came to a standstill, the London poor exploded in a riot, demanding relief from the terrible conditions of poverty. Alarmed shopkeepers closed down their establishments, fearing the 10,000-strong crowd that was marching from Deptford to London. The marchers had to be dispersed by the police. A similar riot occurred in late 1887. This time, it was brutally suppressed by the police in what came to be known as the Bloody Sunday of November 1887. 2 years later, thousands of London stockworkers went on strike and marched through the city. According to one writer, thousands of the strikers had marched through the city without a pocket being picked or a window being broken. The 12-day strike was called to gain recognition for the dockworkers' union. From these examples you can see that large masses of people could be drawn into political causes in the city. A large city population was thus both a threat and an opportunity. State authorities went to great lengths to reduce the possibility of rebellion and enhance urban aesthetics, as the example of Paris shows. The city in colonial India in sharp contrast to Western Europe in the same period, Indian cities did not mushroom in the 19th century. The pace of urbanization in India was slow under colonial rule. In the early 20th century, no more than 11% of Indians were living in cities. A large proportion of these urban dwellers were residents of the 3 presidency cities. These were multifunctional cities. They had major ports, warehouses, homes and offices, army camps, as well as educational institutions, museums and libraries. Bombay was the premier city of India. It expanded rapidly from the late 19th century, its population going up from 644,405 in 1872 to nearly 1,500,000 in 1941. Let us look at how Bombay developed. Bombay, the prime city of India. In the 17th century, Bombay was a group of 7 islands under Portuguese control.
This is Being Prodigy. To get special study material, just contact us through the link in the description, and please subscribe to show your support.
In 1661, control of the islands passed into British hands after the marriage of Britain's King Charles II to the Portuguese princess. The East India Company quickly shifted its base from Surat, its principal western port, to Bombay. At first, Bombay was the major outlet for cotton textiles from Gujarat. Later, in the 19th century, the city functioned as a port through which large quantities of raw materials such as cotton and opium would pass. Gradually, it also became an important administrative center in western India, and then, by the end of the 19th century, a major industrial center. Work in the city Bombay became the capital of the Bombay Presidency in 1819, after the Maratha defeaturing in the Anglo-Maratha War. The city quickly expanded. With the growth of trade in cotton and opium, large communities of traders and bankers as well as artisans and shopkeepers came to settle in Bombay. The establishment of textile mills led to a fresh surge in migration. The first cotton textile mill in Bombay was established in 1854. By 1921, there were 85 cotton mills with about 146,000 workers. Only about 1/4 of Bombay's inhabitants between 1881 and 1931 were born in Bombay. The rest came from outside. Large numbers flowed in from the nearby district of Ratnagiri to work in the Bombay mills. Women formed as much as 23% of the mill workforce in the period between 1919 and 1926. After that, their numbers dropped steadily to less than 10% of the total workforce. By the late 1930s, women's jobs were increasingly taken over by machines or by men. Bombay dominated the maritime trade of India till well into the 20th century. It was also at the junction head of 2 major railways. The railways encouraged an even higher scale of migration into the city. For instance, famine in the dry regions of Kutch drove large numbers of people into Bombay in 1888 to 1889. The flood of migrants in some years created panic and alarm in official circles. Worried by the influx of population during the plague epidemic of 1898, district authorities sent about 30,000 people back to their places of origin by 1901. Housing and neighborhoods. Bombay was a crowded city. While every Londoner in the 1840s enjoyed an average space of 155 square yards, Bombay had a mere 9.5 square yards. By 1872, when London had an average of 8 persons per house, the density in Bombay was as high as 20. From its earliest days, Bombay did not grow according to any plan, and houses, especially in the fort area, were interspersed with gardens. The Bombay Fort area, which formed the heart of the city in the early 1800s, was divided between a native town, where most of the Indians lived, and a European or white section. A European suburb and an industrial zone began to develop to the north of the fort settlement area, with a similar suburb and cantonment in the south. This racial pattern was true of all three presidency cities. With the rapid and unplanned expansion of the city, the crisis of housing and water supply became acute by the mid-1850s. The arrival of the textile mills only increased the pressure on Bombay's housing.
This is Being Prodigy. To get special study material, just contact us through the link in the description. And please subscribe to show your support. Thank you and happy learning.